having some difficulty. I didn't take my medicine, my pain medicine, so I was having a problem, y'all. So I'm sorry. And I had to put some soup on my stomach or something. Let me tell y'all, I thought I was gonna go in there, have this thing done, be out, and that was gonna be it and all. I always underestimate that. So like I said, they removed the kidney stone. Y'all, if y'all see it's how small it was, like it's not even big for it to disrupt all of that. That just shows you like how the body, like any little foreign thing can cause the biggest problem. Like, cause I should have asked them if they could let me take a picture, but I didn't. So it was very small. It broke like into two pieces, but it was very small. But they explained to me like because it was rigid, and they showed me like all of these different things, and I was like, they said that has an impact. They also have to send it off to the lab to see what it's made of, and then based on what the kidney stone is made of, determines on what they suggest I do moving forward. So I told you when I went to go see the doctor for the office visit prior to the scheduling that she had explained to me some dietary things I can do to try to avoid getting it again. But yesterday when I saw Dr. Thompson, my regular urologist, he's the one who did the surgery. Um he let me know that depending on what it's made of, there may be some medication that they will have me take in order to prevent it. And if it's made, I forgot to ask him what were the things it could be made of. That's what I did forget to ask him. So I'll look into that later on. But he was like that it might be dietary changes that need to take place. So I guess depending on what type of kidney stone and what your kidney stone is made of, that is what's going to determine what they recommend going forward to try to prevent you from getting it again and it occurring. So I want to pick up where I left off and trying to hit the points and concerns from Skylight's video in reference to some of the things that I mentioned. Like I said, I am only assuming that she was responding to my video because of something she mentioned about the medical thing. And I know I said that. So um, I wanted to respond to those things coming from my perspective. I can only speak for me, and that's who I'm speaking for. So we stopped off where I was talking about the situation with the BOP. Why the reason why I don't feel like it was any attorney-client privilege information. It's not because it was explicitly stated, but it was the implication. There is implication and there is evidence that's implicating that there was no attorney-client privilege information submitted through that BOP officer that breached R. Kelly's personal communications. And the reason that there's one reason that I said that, but then there's also something else that kind of is confirming me to be true. So the things that I stated before I got off live were that Bonjean, I'm pretty sure Bonjean would have aggressively went towards a filing similar motions and briefs to Burnley if that were the case. But she did not do that. And then when Brindley took over and pivoted, he did not stay with the BOP officer. We then get an introduction of this character, Mondi, who is supposed to be the cellmate of R. Kelly. And this is where this story then picks up. And so then the story speaks directly to what I'm about to read to you right now. Right? Okay. So I asked Google the question: does a BOP breach of email entitle an inmate to a new trial? The response that Google gave me was a breach of attorney-client privilege information via the Federal Bureau of Prisons email system does not automatically entitle an inmate to a new trial. Now, I know that it's been said by plenty of people that they feel like it should automatically give a new trial. But like I said, it's funny how when the rules are in the favor of the defendant, that they are okay with the rules in the legal system. And then when it does not favor the defendant, then this is when they have problem, and then they want to create their own rules and they don't care and they don't want to hear what anybody else has to say. But this is what some people are basing their comments on, basing their opinion on. And this is where my opinion is coming from this. Okay. So it says, to obtain a new trial, the inmate must prove that the monitoring was an intentional government intrusion that resulted in actual precedents to their defense. So what the prosecution was saying, and what Keller was explaining last night on Sky Life Channel, is that the prosecution is saying that this BOP officer was a lone wolf. They were not acting on the behalf of the government and on the prosecutors. They are a separate government agency, and they dealt with the disciplinary action within that agency. The prosecutors are saying we didn't receive any information, we didn't get any from them. Our investigation didn't come from emails, and because if it did, we could have obtained it ourselves. We have the ability to get those communications ourselves, so we don't need the BOP officer to give us anything in order for us to build the case, right? So the when it's saying to obtain a new trial, the inmate must prove that the monitoring was an intentional government intrusion that resulted in actual prejudice to the defense. This is why the prosecution is saying that it doesn't meet that burden. That what you are alleging and suggesting, it doesn't meet that burden because we could have gotten access to that information ourselves. We could have presented that information to Azriel in order to get her assistance in this case. We did not need a Tasha K, a BOP Officer A, or Angelo Clary to do that because we had it within our own legal jurisdiction to do that, right? So this is part of the reason why I'm also saying that I don't believe that the discovery that was handed over that to the defense that there was any breach of attorney client. I know that is what the defense wants to hold on to, and rightfully so, they're going to. They're using that as a solid base, or they're trying to make it a solid base for why they believe that there was some breach and that he should get a new trial or he should be free or whatever. So of course they're going to stick to that. But based on the movement and the strategy of the defense team, it's not consistent because I would think they would stay on that if they truly felt like that there was some attorney client information in that information. They didn't. They completely pivoted. And their pivot is going to do what I'm about to read to you now. So, what I'm about to read to you now is what is needed in order to get a new trial granted when there has been a breach. Okay? So, no it says a new trial is only granted if the defense can prove specific criteria. No automatic waiver bypass. So it says inmates must consent. And we're going to come back to this consent thing again, okay? Because there was another thing mentioned and commented on from my commentary, okay? So it says inmates must consent to monitoring of the TrueLink system. If an inmate uses the system to discuss legal strategy, despite the posted warnings, courts have often ruled they waive the privilege, okay? I'm going to tell you another case where this was an issue, and it was in the Lori Vallow Daybell case that I covered on my channel. She had there is a way, even during COVID, the legal system, because if attorneys weren't able to make it into the prison because of COVID restrictions or because of their own personal feelings about COVID, there was a way to create a private back channel for attorneys to be able to communicate with their clients, but it had to be requested by the attorneys to do this because they knew that they would be discussing attorney client privilege information. If that was not established and set up by the client to talk on this back channel that is created to be private and secure for attorney client information to be discussed, and the attorney and the client proceed to talk on the monitored system, then it is not considered attorney client privilege information. And so, what this Google response is saying is that a new trial is only granted if the defense can prove specific criteria. And it says inmates must consent to monitoring of the TrueLink system. If an inmate uses the system to discuss legal strategy, despite the posted warnings, courts have often ruled they waive the privilege. So they cannot discuss on that. There is a way even through COVID, and I remember Keller had spoke about this a long time ago, but even through COVID, there was a back channel that was created for attorney-client privilege information to be discussed because of the shutdown and because of what COVID had done. And so attorneys and clients should have been advised, and the client should have been advised by their attorneys that if you want to discuss private attorney client privilege information, then we need to do it on a back channel that's secure, that's private, right? And what happened in the Lori Vallow Daybell case was is that she, in one of her communications, she requested a back channel conversation on the monitor system, but then she proceeded to continue to talk about what she said was privileged information on the monitor system. And her attorney did not stop her. So it was determined that wasn't privileged information. But even with that being revealed, all that it did was make the judge say, okay, listen, in true faith, we're not going to allow any of that communication to come in. The prosecution had no intention on using any of the communication that they had, and they let that be known. But and that they had no intentions. In this situation, they did provide that because they were the ones who, when the information was passed to them because certain things were discussed, they made the court aware. But this has come up before. And so if the client and the attorney continue to have conversation on the monitored system, that is not protected by attorney-client privilege, and the privilege is waived. And so I want us to maintain that and keep that in mind when we're going to go over to the Mondi situation, because it speaks to something else that I mentioned, right? So bullet number two, and what the defense would need to prove is prejudice to the defense. So it says the inmate must demonstrate that the prosecution obtained confidential legal strategy and use it to gain an unfair tactical advantage, or that the breach destroyed the defense's ability to receive a fair trial. So this is the part I think where Angie is saying now, where Bo is trying to widen that scope and trying to say that based on the structural error, this cannot be determined what how it would have impacted the trial. And so the Bo is asking for the judge to just get rid of all of what the legal precedent is, because it's no way to even measure this. That you need to go off of what I am explaining to you happened, and not use a metric based on um any type of established precedent, right? And so this is what a strategy that he's implemented, and this is more of the reason, but he's implementing it in the Mondi situation. And this is what is making me think even more so and believe all more so that it is being implicated by these two defense attorneys together, not separate, but together, that there was no breach of attorney-client privilege information from the BOP officer, because they're not hammering down to me, the logical thing would be to use the BOP officer for this. Hey, what's up, grown little boy? The logical thing would be to use the BOP officer and try to create this strategy, use this strategy with the BOP officer in order to request a new trial. But they are using Mondi, and so it is letting me know that between those two attorneys, based on what they gathered, that they don't believe that any attorney-client privilege information was transmitted by the BOP officer. So no, it's not explicitly being said in this defense strategy, but it's implying it. And at any time, if anybody disagrees with me, I am fine with the disagreement. I just think that the same attempt that I made in order to try to explain how I arrived where I arrived, that same effort be placed into a response. Because to just accuse someone of being intellectually dishonest without providing the reasons why, no foundation, no factual base, I don't think that's fair. That's not fair. I am providing basis for how I arrive at my conclusion. I didn't arrive at this conclusion because I'm some dumb blonde that somebody placed these thoughts in my mind. I took care and thought into it, and I used past experience, past research, past all of the same things that everyone else claims that they use, in order to arrive at my opinion. Nobody planted this in my brain. Okay. So, and like I said, the framework, because framework of how you approach something is important. The framework that I am approaching this R. Kelly trial from is from someone who is shows great interest in true crime. In the true crime community, you have some people who lean one way or the other, but there is an overarching theme of justice. You said send you those documents. I want to read it. I have questions. Okay, I will. I'll send them to you because I forwarded all of these responses to myself. Grown little boy. So I'll send them to you. Drop in here where I can send it to because I don't even know where to send it to you at. So drop in here where to send it to you. I'll send you a dummy email, a test email, not a dummy email, a test email, and then I'll send you what I what I have. Hold on one second. I'm gonna just pull up the message so I can send it to you when it comes. So this is how I'm coming to this conclusion, right? That based on what Google responded to me based on my question. Now, I didn't Google this before I arrived to this conclusion. I'm Googling it now because I want to make sure that there's nothing disingenuous at how I arrived at what I perceive to be true, right? That this is an idea out here. This is out here. This is facts. This is how I was able to arrive at my conclusion. These are things that I already knew, but in order for me to show that I'm not the only one who thinks like this, I put it into Google so that me and Google can have a conversation, and then I can allow you all to join into that conversation, right? And so I would think that this is something, the one that I just mentioned, prejudice to the defense. I would think that this is something that could possibly have been used as a scenario with the BOP officer, but instead of the defense using the BOP officer to try to create this strategy around this scenario and use that in emotion, they created a whole new character, Mondi, and they are assigning these things to him. And it sounds like Google and what I asked Google, and it's coming back right because this is almost a script for what they're doing with Mondi. It what I put in, okay? So the next thing says, the confidential legal mail, unmonitored legal phone calls, and in-person visits, which mitigates the claims that email monitoring entirely deprived them of their right to counsel. So that is what is being alleged now in Bro's new motion. But they're applying it to Mondi. They're not applying it to the BOP officer. And so to me, even though the defense attorneys are not coming out and saying there was no attorney-client privilege information breach with the BOP officer, they are implying. I can see read between the lines. And that's whether the screen is black or white. If the screen is black, I'm reading in the black. If the screen is white, I'm reading I'm sorry. Yeah, if the screen is black, I'm reading in the black because the words will be in white. And if the screen is white, I'm reading in the white because the words are black. I'm reading in between the lines and saying, I see what you're doing. I see the response to whether or not there was information breach because you all did not stay on that BOP officer. And I actually think that was the best method. And when people listen to Angie's live, Angie is going to highlight something that I said that she's going to say that would possibly really be a good legal strategy for Bo to go with. So I'm not denying that there might be a way to go at that strategically, but I think that it would have been best to stay on the BOP officer. I think the problem with staying on the BOP officer is that Bonjean, in good faith, knew that all of it was a bunch of hogwash. After she got back, when she got back, she wasn't willing to go any further, which led Kels to Bo Brindley, who is ready to almost land himself in jail in order to defend his client. And since it is being questioned my motive, I am going to go through the cases that highlight what Bo Brindley has done in the past that leads me to believe that. Right? Like I said, he's been reprimanded by local, state, and federal judges for his dishonesty and his practices, his legal practices. So he's been threatened on multiple occasions to be sent to the ethics board. So I'm not basing this off of me being a bimbo or a dumb blonde who is just believing what society is telling me, or this is on the indoctrination. I am arriving at this because I'm arriving at it because I looked into it, right? Levi, you said, I appreciate your analysis, Carter. This is what's required. Individuals like you, Miss Walker, Jojo, Larry, Miss Me, Miss Mo, and other intelligent people who are willing to have the discussion. Right. That's what I'm saying, Levi. Like, I know a lot of times, because I do believe that the evidence did arrive to a guilty verdict. A lot of times people don't want to hear what anyone is saying if they don't agree with them. But what I'm saying is that I'm able to look past that, and I'm able to see where there could be some strategy here. But I think that based on the way that I'm seeing the strategy being implemented is letting me know what they have and what they don't have. And maybe that just comes from me watching and being a part of true crime communities, me being so interested in true crime. Um, at one point, I was considering going to law school. I didn't do it, and that was my own laziness. But so I have a interest in the law, and so I carry all of that with me. You say still, I appreciate. Thank you so much, Levi. Thank you. I thank y'all for coming in here. But I'm just trying to clarify because I would really like for us to be able to get to a space where we can have conversation without all of the insulting and all of that, and try to get people to really try to search for the truth, sift through to find the truth, right? Like, in my opinion, I would think that that's what we are all here for, is to injustice doesn't just happen one way. Sometimes it's happening in multiple facets, and you got to be able to see that. And like I said, and I think that my channel, the things that I've posted on my channel, show that I don't always lean one way. In this case, I have an opinion that there is guilt, but I can still look at all of the other things and say, okay, let me see what's here. If it's something here, I'm willing to listen and see, is it something there? And so that's what I have in relation to the BOP officer, right? That was the question that me and Google had a conversation, and Google gave me back those responses, and it confirmed things I've already said out here in the open. I didn't Google these things and come and talk about them. I'm Googling them now to show you that I didn't just arrive this out of the dim blue sky. Right? I did it. This is something that, because I watch true crime, because I apply my knowledge, because I apply the things that my education to different things, this is how I arrive at it. And my framework is coming from a true crime perspective. It is not coming from me being whether or not I'm a R. Kelly supporter or whether or not I am a R. Kelly opposer. I am coming from a true crime perspective where I am looking on both sides to see, where does justice lie? Looking for truthfulness, sifting to find the truth. I am fully aware that the prosecutors, government can do things. I'm looking at it a whole bunch of it now with this bullshit with Donald Trump. I speak about it every day. So I'm fully aware that the government can do things. It's just that you said why they take me out. Listen, I'm about to go into that because I'm about to switch back now, Larry, to the Chicago thing and these motions. That, make sure you put your email in here, Larry, so that I can email you so I can send you the stuff. So I'm shifting, and that was why I wanted to make that pivot. You said I was planning on getting paid. Shut up. This is why I shifted and I pivoted that way. And I told you, I want you. It's in there. Let me see. I don't see it, Larry. I don't see your email. Um, So this is why I wanted you to keep in mind what I was saying about the BOP officer, because I feel like what Bo Brindley is doing with his motion now, because we know the initial motion that he filed, where he had all of these outlandish allegations that I don't believe, and I'm entitled to not believe it, right? And I don't believe any of it. I don't. And outside of the fact, like I said, that there might be a medical issue, but this is something that I know me and Levi even discussed in the past, that if the medical issue was exactly what Bo Brindley said, our concern is about him getting the proper medical treatment. And I read in my last live, I read to you what the process should have been, and his attorney didn't produce any of that. And so they willed the hammer against the BOP and what they lack to do, but then they don't wield the helmet in the direction of the attorney who could have actually got an injunction from the judge to get R. Kelly rushed back to that hospital to get this emergency surgery that they're alleging. That attorney allowed R. Kelly to go from the hospital to the hole, and he didn't use any of his legal avenues in order to try to get R. Kelly back to the hospital. And when I'm saying that, that is something that I did not see the supporters rally behind and try to force to happen. And I think that's the most important thing, because all of the legal remedies that you can come up with don't mean anything if he's no longer here, because he's not getting the emergency care that he needs. And I'm sorry, all day, every day, all day long, when it comes to healthcare, I am going to be the biggest, loudest advocate in saying, hey, this is an issue, this is a problem. If you're saying that this is what's wrong, how come this is not being the priority? How come this is not being addressed? And so I think the fact that the supporters, like I said, I heard Lady D express some emphasis, but I did not hear an overwhelming voice from the supporters demanding that this attorney follow all of his legal processes to get R. Kelly back to that hospital. And I know people might not like that I said it, but if you saw something different, let me know. I just didn't see it. I didn't see any overwhelming support trying to get him back into the hospital for this emergency surgery. I didn't see any pressure being placed on Brindley to produce the documents that he said that he was going to produce publicly. He said he was going to produce them to show what was going on with Kels legally. And so this is where am looking at it with skepticism. I'm not basing it off of nothing. I'm not basing it because my mind has been I've been zapped and my mind has been distorted, and I'm just going along with the status quo. That's not where my conclusion is coming from. Now, I'm not saying that other people conclusion might not have come to that, but my conclusion doesn't come from that, right? So now, like I said, we looked at what it said what would be needed in order for a new trial to be requested from the breach from the BOP officer. Now I want to pivot and take us to Chicago and take us to the fact that Mondi is on these platforms and he's saying that he was R. Kelly's roommate prior Bunky. Well, I say roommate, but Bunky. Prior to Levi, you said I agree 100% with you because it requires that type of methodology when it comes to the law. Do y'all see? I don't see the email, Larry. I don't see it. Listen, send it to my email. Send it to CAWAS the number 4 at iCloud.com. Send me an email there. And then after this is over with, I'll respond and I'll forward you the stuff. Okay. So now we're going to pivot. We're going to consider all of the things that I said that Google returned back to me on what would be needed if there's a BOP breach that violates attorney-client privilege. And now we're going to go to Chicago. We're going to Mondi being this roommate. And we're going to look at what they said would be needed in order for there to be a new trial with the BOP officer. And we're going to apply it to Mondi. Okay. This is how I arrive at that this was a refurbished storyline and they just added a different character and they used the prescription, and Google is almost confirming that this is the prescription that was used. It is Larry, it's CAWAS the number 4, it's all lowercase, CAWAS the number 4, don't spell it out, just the number, at iCloud.com. Send me a message, and then after I get off of here, I'll forward you everything. So I went and looked to see, because there was some. Now I said this on my original live when I was talking about it, that I talked about the fact that R. Kelly shared his private, according to Mondi, and according to those who are speaking on behalf of R. Kelly in this situation by proxy, they are saying that Mondi had personal access to R. Kelly's private communications, personal communications, right? That R. Kelly willfully gave him this access. Now, y'all saw when I just read, and I'm going to go back real quick. Y'all saw when I just read how does the BOP a breach from the BOP. Y'all saw what I read when with the new trial request that it said about the attorney client. If the attorneys and the client don't request a back channel to discuss attorney client privilege, okay, Larry, it's CAWAS, the number 4 at iCloud.com. Okay. So y'all see, it said that means they waive privilege. If they talk on that monitored system, they are waiving privilege. If the attorney and the client, if they don't request a back channel that's private and secure, because that exists, that does not exist through the TrueLink system or systems like that that are monitored. There are systems that exist where attorney and client can communicate with one another. If for some reason the attorney can't make it to the facility, but that has to be set up on a private back channel, whatever that system is that they utilize. It cannot be on the monitored system. And so what it is saying is that if they have a conversation on that system, they are waiving privilege. They are automatically waiving privilege. Let's look at what R. Kelly did with Mondi and why I said he's automatically giving consent. He's automatically giving consent because he is the person who gave this private login information to Mondi, according to Mondi and the people who are speaking on his behalf by proxy. He gave him this information. And so by him giving him that information, and he's on these public platforms discussing the type of conversations that he was having with Kels, right? And he's even given information about advice that he gave Cal about specific persons on YouTube. Then the reason that I say that the prosecutors did not have to lie in their brief to a request for a new trial because of this structural error is because they could have just told the truth. And let me read first some information, and then I'm going to explain that. Okay. So I asked Google, can inmates share the email password info with other inmates? And the response is no. Inmates are generally strictly prohibited from sharing their email login credentials with other inmates. Doing so violates facility rules, as each inmate is assigned an individual account that is monitored by prison staff for security purposes. And it says, why is password sharing prohibited? Accountability is bullet 1. Prison email systems such as Federal Bureau of Prisons TrueLinks or CoreLinks requires users to agree to electronic monitoring if someone else uses the account. The registered inmate is held accountable for any rule-breaking content sent. Okay? So the other reason why they don't want inmates sharing this is because of security and extortion. If you give your information to another inmate, then you are signing up for your security to be breached and to be extorted. You have put yourself into that situation, not anyone else. You have. The second bullet is contraband. Allowing a fellow inmate access to approved personal contact compromises the safety of friends and family members on the outside. Here are the consequences for breaking those rules. An inmate caught sharing accounts or logging into another inmate's account face serious disciplinary action. Consequences typically include loss of messaging and tablet privileges, loss of commissary privileges, placement in the SHU or solitary confinement, and then additional disciplinary reports on their institutional record. This is the response that I got from Google when I asked it that. So, couple that with what it said about attorney-client privilege information being you are waiving your privilege when you speak on a monitored system. And then we go over to why sharing your information with inmates is not allowed. This is something that is now being spread on public platforms that was facilitated by the defendant. And I spoke in my live about why that may have been. I mentioned the fact that he has difficulty reading or maybe comprehending what he's reading, right? So some would say, well, and it was said, well, that's why he allowed that to happen. What I explained, and I used the Rashona Landfair's services that she received that the prosecution arranged for her as an example. I only used it as an example because I was using it as an example of how R. Kelly is entitled to same kind of services. So it's to not place him in this situation where it is the reason that he's given these services is to not place him in a vulnerable situation, to not place him into a situation where his security, his privacy, his privilege can be breached, he can be extorted, right? To not place any of his loved ones into a situation. So the system is set up in order to protect the inmate. So they provide services, whether his attorneys got him some type of outside services where people could translate his private communications for him that would be bound to protect his attorney client privilege, because an inmate is not bound to protect your attorney client privilege. And the way that this is being presented out here, people are making it seem like they are. They're not. An inmate is not entitled to protect your attorney client privilege. Any information, and I'm going to read something on that later that I asked a question to Google. Any information that an inmate willfully shares with another inmate, that inmate can decide to go and take it somewhere and it can be used because they willfully did it, which is something else I'm going to hit on later. So remember, I said that when quoting what I say, just please, I know it might be difficult to say it exactly how I say, but encapsulate everything that I'm saying, right? Not just the points that go along with the narrative that you're presenting, right? So this is the reason why this is the case. So just like the government was able to provide services and direct Rashona to services to help her to find a to fill out the application to have somewhere to live. These are services that are given to victims because in lots of situations, victims are left in vulnerable situations where their shelter is compromised. Right? So let's look for instance. This is why these services are able to be provided, right? And that prosecutors are able to direct to these services and assist with these services being attained. Because, okay, you got a woman, a housewife, who's being beaten by her husband. She has no money. She has nowhere to go, right? You said, did Robert willfully tell the Indian to discuss Robert's mail? You said, did Robert willfully tell the Indian to discuss Robert's mail? Which what I'm saying is that whatever Bo was attempting to build, it could have been. It is possible on this public platform that it could be tore down, and it was also possible that they could have been releasing strategy to the prosecution, because in the event that the prosecution did make any kind of contact with Mondi, they could use what's being said now on these public platforms to have crafted a legal justification for the information that Mondi got and how they used it, because they're telling them that RSK gave Mondi access to certain information that could have also potentially included his attorney-client privilege information. So you said, Carla, I am inviting you, Miss Walker, Larry, Jojo, and Miss Mo on my channel this evening so we can have a little discussion about this very important topic. If you are interested, let me know. Yeah, just let me know with time, Levi. And I I had a kidney stone removed. So I am on medications. As long as I'm not sounding crazy and delirious. Right now I was able to stabilize myself. That's why I had to get off the last live, because I started to have some issues because my pain medication was wearing off. But as long as I'm not, because I ain't gonna be coming on there sounding delirious now, because you know how these people like to use something to get you leave out. But yes, as long as I'm okay, I'm up to it. I'm up to having a conversation. Um, you said I'm going to put the documents on the screen and have the honest intellectual discussion. Let me know if you're interested and let me know when you are available so I can coordinate. I must say, I know for a fact. Okay, so I'm trying to think of what. I'm gonna say I probably will be stabilized around 9:30, 10 o'clock. 9:30, 10 o'clock. If that's okay with everybody else. I don't want to interfere with what everybody else got to do. I know a lot of times Mo can't be up that late. So if you do want to start before that time, but I'm gonna send these things to Larry, so y'all will already have them. And then if you want to start before that time, then you can go ahead and then I can jump in when I can jump in, but just around between that 7:30 to 9 o'clock hour is when I gotta take the medications, and I may have to give the medication some time to kick in. So, you said this is becoming structured to how the lawyer obtained these. Yeah, basically, basically, right? I mean, I'm sorry, but it just is what it is. So, so when they when R. Kelly, when I say that he consented to giving him access to his information, that's what I mean. That he gave consent. It's the same consent that people dispute when they talk about Azriel Clary, right? It's like, you understand who is gonna consent to let a person take their information to the government? Nobody is knowingly gonna do that. But you're consenting by you not following the rules that gave the person the access. Right? So we can go back to what it said about the BOP, right? Officer. It says with the BOP officer that the inmate um must demonstrate that prosecution obtained confidential legal strategy and that they were in coordination with the Bureau of Prisons in order to get this information. The government is saying that they were not in any ways in coordination. They did not receive this information from the BOP, and there was no reason for them to have to receive this information from the BOP because they could have just gotten it themselves. They didn't need BOP Officer A to do this. They could have just presented this information to Azriel themselves. They did not need Angelo Clary to do that. So, for whatever reason, and I know everybody has their opinions, but I'm just saying as a blanket statement, for whatever reason, Angelo Clary took the information from the BOP officer A either to Tasha K, either he got it directly. I'm not sure I'm not sure of the chain of custody because it was a chain of custody with that. I know we normally use that when we talk about evidence, but it's a chain of custody between Angelo, Tasha K, and the BOP officer. We don't know what their chain of custody was. We don't know if it went directly to Angelo and then Angelo gave it to Tasha K. We don't know if it went to Tasha K and she gave it to Angelo. At least I don't know. Maybe some people who have had conversations with him, maybe they know. Maybe they know based on what they were told. But I don't know or can't confirm the chain of custody. All we know is that I guess it's confirmation that Angelo is the one, and that was something interesting that I thought Skylight brought out in her live. That Angelo says that he is the one who showed these messages to Azriel, right? So, for whatever reason he did it, the government did not need Angelo to do that because they had access to the same information that the BOP had, and they could have presented it to it herself. And so they're saying this was not vital to the prosecution because the BOP officer agent was not acting on their behalf, right? So, that is that. So now let's go to I asked Google. Hold on one second, y'all. I'm gonna flip in between screens. Um, I probably need to close some of this stuff. Hold on, you guys. Let me close some of this so that I don't accidentally close something. Okay, so I said, did the government um Hold on, you guys. I just got to get to back to the email. Okay. Let's see. Okay, that's saying that. Now let me see. Because I got a couple of things a couple of ways I had to send it to myself when I was searching, y'all. Because like I said, I am high on drugs from my kidney stone removal. So um I was sending myself stuff. Okay, anyway, let's go to this. So you said cool, 9 to 10, we can start the conversation and wait for you to come in. Okay, all right, yeah, that sounds good, Levi. Okay. Um, Yeah, Imma send it to you as soon as I get off of here, Larry. I'm not gonna be too much longer. I'm gonna try to tie it up. I just wanted to hit all of the points of concern that Skylife had because I don't want her or anyone else to think I'm being intellectually dishonest. I just have a different framework I'm coming from when I'm talking about this, and I am looking at this as truthful as how I see the truth to be after me sifting through. So that's why I wanted to come on here to provide the feedback. And I'm glad that she did give me some feedback. You know, even though some of it was a little rough way, and I don't think it was a full interpretation. I'm glad she gave us some feedback so that we can try to evolve the conversation. So, Mondi was on the platform, like I said. He's proclaiming that he was R. Kelly's roommate while he was in the BOP, MCC. When he first got to Chicago, and then, or at some point when he was in Chicago the first time, and then when he came back, he was the roommate. And so Mondi is saying that he stole these attorney-client privileged information and that he sent this attorney-client privileged information over to over to um someone to utilize it. Now, publicly it was stated that Mondi um uh had some kind of arrangement. I don't know if it was publicly initially said with the prison or with the prosecutors. I can't remember, right? But somebody made these arrangements with him. The prosecutors are vehemently denying that they had any conversation with Mondi of at the nature. And the reason that I believe them is because if they had any contact, I don't believe them just because I believe the prosecutors are always telling the truth. I believe them because if they had made any kind of contact with Mondi and used anything that Mondi gave to them, they have a legal justification for how they got their information, and they could have used that as an explanation in their brief. And the legal justification is because Mondi was given access to Kel's communications. Kels gave that. He consented. And whether people like what that consent looked like and how it ended up or not, he consented by giving him that access. He would have consented by either leaving that information out in the open in a cell that he shares with this individual that he's given all of this personal access to. How do we know if Mondi's reading Kel's personal emails and stuff to him and has the access to get into that? This is what he said on public platforms. How do we know he's not reading his legal paperwork too? And so the prosecution could have crafted a response that could have made as though Mondi was they adamantly deny that they had anything to do with Mondi getting any of those things, that they got anything from Mondi to use for anything. But if they had done it, because contact can be proven with inmates. If they had contact with the inmate, they could craft a whole nother brief that would incorporate that contact but justify their actions. And because they did not do that, and they are sticking to that they had no contact whatsoever in relation to anything that had to do with R. Kelly, that is why I believe their statements and what they are saying. It is also some things that the defense has done, and what I outlined about something that Lady D noticed when she was reading the brief. And it is a combination of the brief from the defense and from the prosecution that is letting me know that more likely the prosecution is telling the truth in this statement. So when Lady D got to a certain point in the government's brief, the government filed their brief first. Bo Brinley waited until 1 a.m. my time, so it was 12 a.m. Chicago time to submit his. So he would have already at least been able to take a look at what the government had submitted, right? When um when the government put in their motion that all the evidence that Bo had submitted, so the only thing they focused on out of all of the things that they had alleged all the way almost over a year ago, when they told us all of these crazy things in this motion that Bo Burnley filed in order to try to get a new trial, in order to try to get R. Kelly sent home on furlough, all of that stuff, all of that has been abandoned. None of that is mentioned in any of what we are looking at right now. Right now, we are looking at the structural error in the situation that happened with Mondi breaching the attorney-client privilege by him taking his his attorney-client information out of the cell. That's what we're examining right now. Okay, so all of the other stuff about Larry waterboarding somebody and two, well, one somebody's was alleged waterboarded, but meeting two somebodies in California and all of that other kind of stuff. And I think Dana J even spoke about that briefly yesterday, like in his commentary, where he said he made some stuff up or whatever to tell a particular person. So, like, uh, all of that has been left. It's been abandoned, right? And now we're just looking at Mondi taking R. Kelly's attorney-client privilege information, which is something that would warrant a new trial if he's acting on behalf of the government. And this is what Bo Brinley is putting in his motion. So right now, you guys, I'm kind of talking about both motions together. Okay. So Bo Brinley mentions in his motion that Mondi is acting as an agent of the government because he's saying that the prosecution put Mondi up to this and told him to do this. And they sent him in with a specific mission to get attorney-client privilege information from R. Kelly so that they could get strategy in order to help them with their case. That is what Bo Brinley is alleging in his motion, right? However, we have Mondi publicly stating that R. Kelly willfully gave these things to them. So had the government made contact with Mondi, right? And they say they did come to him with this, they could craft a brief that would talk about the contact, and they could talk about it and say that the prisoner came to us and let us know that this was information that they knew and that they were told willfully this information by the defendant. They could craft a legal justification for how they got these things from Mondi, if they got anything from him and if they used it. They did not do that. And I know that I heard Skylight say, they shouldn't have used it. You can't do that. But that is not how this system works. If the defendant willfully is talking to another inmate who they know are in there for other crimes and are waiting trial, even I wouldn't talk to one that already been through trial, but you know they're awaiting trial, and you're willfully talking to them and telling them and giving them access to all of this your stuff. You can't say to the government that if the inmate comes to them and say that they cannot use that. And that's all I'm saying is that there was nothing in order to compel the judge, and that's what I'm looking at. In order to compel the judge to give R. Kelly a new trial, you cannot present things that are within the legal scope of the prosecution to do. Even if you don't agree that it should be right for them to do. You cannot present those things and think that that's going to tell the judge, yes, he needs a new. Nobody can, the judge is not even supposed to give advice, but she was kind of urging him to do something different. And he chose to do that. And it seems like he's not being held accountable for those choices. Everyone else is being held accountable for these choices but him. And that's the only point that I'm making, it at some point when we handicap people and don't make them accountable for their own choices, this is how you arrive to a situation that snowballed to this magnitude. That's my opinion. This situation has snowballed to this magnitude because all along the way, all of this time, from the moment that he became a star, there have been people making excuses and justifications to not make him accountable for his actions. And so, this is why, in my opinion, he felt like he can continue to do that, and he still continued to doing it, and people are still continuing to give him the excuses because of whatever his developmental delays are, because of whatever his deficiencies might be. And so they are giving all of these excuses, but there were people in place. If people say that they trust Jennifer Bonjean, you got some people, if you look across the supporters, all across the board, right? You that every supporter I've heard speak at least trust one of the attorneys, if not a couple of sets of the attorneys, right? So you gotta believe that amongst that mix, if you were in approval of any of the attorneys, that somewhere along the line, he was given the proper advice. He was given the proper instructions on what to do. You cannot continue to hold other people accountable for him searching for individuals who will go outside of that advice that he's given, that good advice, and then go along with these antics. And that's all I'm saying. I don't think these antics are good for him in the long run. I'm not saying this is somebody who wants him to stay on there or wants him to get out. I'm saying this is a person who's looking from a true crime perspective and saying, surely all of these things that you're doing, if it comes out that there are lies that are being told, if that gets found out, they can put some other people in jeopardy, to put themselves in the way to lie on the behalf of the situation. It's going to put a bad light on you. It's going to make them speak to the things that they already charge you with. This is what I'm speaking to. And I don't know how that is getting confused with I'm the op, or and I just want him to stay there. I don't know if that's being assigned to me or not, but I know that was said. Or I just want him to stay there. I don't know how that's being confused with that. I have actually said that I think that it may. Now, okay, so this is the other thing. So let's go back, because I want to say this before I get off. Let's go back to the BO, what I said about the using the strategy with the BOP officer instead of using it with Mondi, right? So what Bo is alleging in his brief that he filed the other night is that due to the breach of R. Kelly's information, that it created trust issues. He had issues with the security of his information, the securities of his transmittal. And so this somehow impacted him participating in his own defense, right? This is what Bo Brindley is basically summarizing. That all of those things that took place participated in him and interfered with him participating in his own defense. And as a result, since this can't be measured, then he should be given a new trial. He should be given a new trial, right? And so, but the motion is basing it off of Mondi and what Mondi did in order to breach R. Kelly's information. Now, to my understanding from what's being discussed, now Mondi does have a deep accent, so, and I'll let y'all know I can't listen to him all the way through because of that accent, because I deal somewhat daily with calls that I have to try to decipher that, and when I am listening to something for leisure, I don't want to listen to all of that, but I try to tolerate enough of it so I can get a gist of what's being said. But according to what Mondi said, Mondi, like I said, says that he was his bunkie the first time he went into the MCC, and then he again became his bunkie when he came back to the MCC to stand trial for Chicago. Now, R. Kelly was aware of the breach when he left New York. He was aware of the breach. Now, I would think that it would be good strategy if they want to use this strategy that there was an interference with the attorney-client privilege, that they would have used it on the BOP officer. This is what I was saying the other day, that they would have used it on the BOP officer, because then they would have been able to establish, now due to R. Kelly's information being breached, he has a paranoia, he has anxiety, he can't trust anything, and so he doesn't want to communicate or say anything in order for him to be able to interact with his attorneys in order for them to put on a proper defense, right? Now, I don't know if that would work, but I could see that being a good strategy, right? To go with using the BOP officer. Instead, Brinkley uses Mondi in this place, right? And the issue that I find with that, and I apologize if people are like taking offense to the fact that I find issue with it, or that I'm pointing out what I'm seeing. And if I'm wrong factually about something, please let me know. But the problem I see with that is that according to what's being said, R. Kelly did not know about Mondi until after his Chicago trial. So how would Mondi have impact his participation with his defense in the Chicago trial? That is what I'm trying to understand. And that was a question I had and I wanted answered. How could Mondi have interfered with that? When R. Kelly left the MCC, he left the MCC not knowing anything about his communications being taken by BOP Officer A and given to one of the two parties mentioned, right? He left there not knowing that. He came back knowing that happened. It would seem to me that the behavior of someone who is now paranoid to the point where they don't want to communicate on any of these systems about anything because they are fearful that something's going to be said that would aid in their prosecution in the Chicago trial. And it would appear to me that somebody who had that level of paranoia would not then again resume allowing anyone. I don't care whether he trusted Mondi before he left the jail or not. That they wouldn't let anyone have access. That they would ask, can you give me a new password and username because I gave it to someone? I don't want anybody to have it. They wouldn't discuss anything on those systems. Like the behavior would be consistent with someone who was paranoid about these things. And based on Mondi coming on these platforms and people by proxy speaking on the behalf of R. Kelly about his trust of Mondi, I don't see how they could, even if Mondi had revealed to him before he went on trial in Chicago about him breaching his information. And if he still continued to trust Mondi after that, because say Mondi gained his trust because at least he came and told him. Like that's not consistent behavior. The behavior is not consistent. It's not consistent with someone who's developed a paranoia about the government doing things to try to access their strategy in order to try to get a guilty verdict. And that's what I was pointing out. Based on the timeline, nothing Mondi did in making Kells aware of the breach would apply to the time frame of the Chicago trial, because to our understanding, he did not find out about Mondi's breach until after the trial was over. So how could Mondi's actions interfere with the attorney-client privilege? To me, it would seem that it would be a good strategy and a good case to say that what the BOP officer did interfered with that. But now we have Mondi on public platforms providing behavior that is not consistent with someone who would have that kind of paranoia. That's just my observation. This is where all of my conclusion comes from. It doesn't come from anything that anybody planning in my head. It has to do from what I'm listening to, sifting through myself, and I'm coming to some conclusions. And this is how I arrive here. This is why I am leaning on the side of the prosecution that they had no conversations with Mondi, that they didn't use anything that Mondi claims that he got in relation to strategy. And I think, do y'all think for 1 second that if Jennifer Bongine believed that somehow what Mondi did interfere with her being able to put a good case on for Kels, that she would not be fighting tooth and nail for this shit? She wouldn't have handed this over to someone else to take over. She would have been fighting tooth. That's the confidence I have in her as an attorney. This is to show you that I am not one-sided. That is the confidence I have in Jennifer Bongine as an attorney, based on her work that I have watched her do in other cases and what I have watched and read what her do in the Kels case on his behalf. I have the faith in her that if she felt like Mondi had done all of these things to interfere with her case and cause her to lose the case, oh, she would have went hard in the paint. There are some, everything in this situation and how I arrived to my conclusions are not explicit. They are not outlined and written out line by line and word for word what has come out. But I am looking at the implication of all of these things. And this is how I am arriving to the conclusions that I arrive at. I hope that this live is helpful to clear up, at least, even if you disagree, but to at least clear up how I arrived to where I am. That this is not something I'm just going along with the go along, get along. That I have actually taken the time to look at this myself and come to these conclusions. And I hope that my conversation with Google and me sharing that conversation with Google helped you to also give more foundation and understanding that I'm not the only one who can arrive to these conclusions based on this. And I'm going to forward these items over to Larry right now so that him and Levi can take whatever look they would like to take at it, and so that we can try to have a honest, good conversation later, and not one riddled with a whole lot of lies and empty conjecture. That is not nothing that I think that Skylight does. I actually say all the time how I appreciate that Skylight at least speaks honestly. Like, even if we don't agree with her position, she honestly speaks up and says that she's okay with lies being used to get the man out. And I think sometimes the other people are just playing in our face. They know it's lies and they aren't that honest like her to say that. So I hope that this can lead us to a good conversation later on. Like I said, I'm just providing my opinion from my framework, which is someone who is a part of lots of true crime communities. I am someone who reports, discuss, and talks about crime from every socioeconomic status, every ethnic group. I try to draw parallels in between crimes in these groups. I try to present the information so that we can be assessing these things fairly. And then also, it also might help somebody. I don't have any power to create a remedy, but it could help somebody come up with some ideas on remedies and what they need to be looking at before they even present something. Because, like I said, if you look at the two cases that I mentioned, the Dr. Malachi York, the Keith Raniere, when you look at Cal's 30 years compared to 120 and 138, it pales in comparison. And I know that that's a hard reality for people to come to, but it is the truth. And there are many more cases, Keith Raniere cases, Malachi York cases, amongst everyday regular citizens charged with the same things. And these are the things that the prosecution will use to defend their position. And so that's why I think it's important that, and I think Bo is smart. He knows this. I don't think they both a uneducated. So I don't want anybody to translate my statements for that. I don't think he's uneducated. I don't think he's stupid. I think that he's crooked and shady. It's a difference. And like I said, I'm on that border with Brian Steele too. And despite what people think, I know people think that the defense team can go about any kind of way to defend their client, but that is not true. They are bound by ethics the same way that the prosecution is bound by ethics. And so I think that when we are looking at whether people are operating within ethical guidelines, we need to look at both sides evenly, not just one side. I'm not a one-sided person like that. So when I see one side being unfairly assessed, then it will make me take the position. This is why sometimes people might see me fluctuate, because it will make me take the position of the other side, because I believe that all of these things that were crafted and created, um shut up, Larry. I'm glad they did. I'm glad they did. I'm glad they abandoned that. But like I said, I was willing to hear all of this stuff in the court of law, because I'm interested in hearing some of this stuff that's been said out here, being placed in the court of law, under oath, sworn under oath. And this is my concern. And I'm just being honest. This is my concern for what Bo Brindley is doing now. In one of the cases that I'm going to read you on Bo Brindley, it is going to speak to why I'm concerned about what he's doing right now. That's all I'm going to say. I have a case where Bo Brindley had to file an appeal because he was found in contempt of court. And there was the ruling from the judge, they overturned the contempt, right, in the appeals court. However, the judge, in his opinion, listed some things that I'm concerned that might be what's happening in this situation. And if that is the case, and if all of this stuff doesn't pan out to be true, it can create some legal issues for him. Now, I know that he's been down this road before. He knows how to get himself out of it. I'm just saying that's what I'm saying, and I'm being honest about what I'm saying. And I can't help it that I did look into these additional things in order to find these things, and some of the people don't know. And I understand that some of their um lack of being able to look at it the way I do is because they didn't read these things and they don't know. But there is a case where he was found in contempt of court he was defending a drug dealer, and he was found in contempt of court, and he did some things and told some lies, and because he did not tell the lies in the right place, that is how it got overturned. But now I think that this is potentially, listen, when I read the case, I will give more of the insight to what I'm telling y'all, because that's kind of commentary for that case. But that's what I'm concerned about. And then I'm concerned about, then how does this then impact RSK, and how could this impact him down the line? And I think a lot of times, because people are thinking about the immediate relief, they are not thinking about the long term. And I so happen to be thinking about that. I'm thinking about the long term, because the same people who were happy with the short term impact of what happened in those trials in the early 2000s, they didn't realize that this could happen in the long term. And so it's proof that we need to be looking at what is happening now to see how it can affect the long term. And that's all I'm trying to convey, is him accepting what he has to do now the best thing for him to try to move forward. Because the other thing I think that people are not considering, and I shared this the other day, if you request a new trial and he does get a new trial and then he's convicted again, and especially when it comes down to the Chicago case, and in the Chicago case, like I say, Levin Weber Penn, he would have given R. Kelly more time if it had not been for his conviction in New York. That means that the information that was presented could have allowed Levin Weber to give R. Kelly more time. Who is to say that if this goes back into Chicago and then he is found guilty again? Because my issue is with the evidence. You cannot take away the child pornography that's been authenticated. You cannot take that away. So no matter whatever else it is you try to say, they aren't using that early video from the 2000s as a piece of evidence that was shown to the jury. They were using that for the obstruction, which he was acquitted on. So now you would just be dealing with the child pornography charges. Taking that back into court could potentially be risky for him, because if he's found guilty of that again, then that judge could look at this and that judge could sentence him to much longer time. on the Chicago side. And so I am thinking about all of the things that the supporters say now, and then what could end up being the outcome as a result of what they're asking with all of these short-term remedies. Instead of trying to go about this in a way like Bonjean was, she was trying to find procedural things, trying to find ways to get in there in order to get this overturned, in order to get him just get like a Cosby, like she did with Cosby. She's trying to find something along those lines. That is a more lasting long-term solution. And we see that even in some circumstances, that's not always lasting. That doesn't always clear someone from any accountability, any level of accountability. But what she found, how she was able to do that, and a lot of times that takes time. It takes research. It takes looking into it. Why do you think sometimes it takes the innocent project such a long time in order to deal with clients when they are looking at these cases? Trying to find a loophole, a legal maneuver is difficult to do. And so, but it's like everybody wants all these microwave solutions. And I just happen to think that these microwave solutions just don't work. They don't work. We look at, and in my opinion, this is my opinion, we look at how he circumvented the allegations from the early 2000s. That's how I look at it. Now, I know some people believe that he wasn't guilty of those things. That's their right. But I look at how he circumvented that, right? And then I look at where we end up now. Like I said, I have another case with Lindsay Whitestone. I will repost the case where there is a similar thing that happens. She is a regular civilian. She is a regular person. She has a lot of influence in her community, and that influence ended up working against her. But she was charged in the state. Because of the favor that she had with the judge in the state case, because she has strong family connections and her family is well known in the community, the sentencing went extremely wrong according to the district attorney. They were not satisfied with it. They were not satisfied with the results on behalf of the victim. And so the victim's family did things in order to try to rally with the community for something more to be done. The district attorney went and had something more done. The district attorney recommended the case to the federal government and handed over all the evidence. The federal government was able to find that the federal laws were broken. And as a result, guess what? She's being detained without bond right now, waiting federal trial. So this is not a new employed tactic. This has been used on regular people and nobody paid attention. And that's why I always say, like, when people say, well, if they can do it to them, they can do it to us. That's what other people say. I always say this. No, they've been doing it to them. That's how, I mean, they've been doing it to us. That is how they can figure out how to do it to them. You test first with your least common denominator. So you test first with the people where you have the least accountability and responsibility, who might not have what it takes in order to properly defend themselves. And then you get practice and you get good, and then you know that then you can go after the more powerful, the more elite. That's my opinion of how it flows. But I know some people say it the other way around. And so this, like I said, these strategies, these things, they are not new things. They've been doing this. They've been doing this to regular everyday people. So we don't gotta wait for them to come do it to our sons and our daughters. They were doing it there first. It's now reaching to that level. It's now reaching to that magnitude. So you guys, that's all I have for you for right now. Hopefully I'll get to see you guys over at Levi's channel later on. So that we can try to have a exchange of free flowing ideas without too much insulting. I'm hoping Larry and Levi and everybody else that we can try to just have a really good conversation and see if we can just be honest about what we're looking at. I know people at the end you still might not like it, but you have to be honest about what you're looking at. And that's just how I feel. I feel like to be this jaded, I have to say this. I feel like the jading comes from the fact that this is a celebrity, because a lot of the people that I hear speaking, when I hear them speak about everyday things, they are able to apply some of this logic to everyday things. And so it makes me question how they are applying it when it comes to this situation. Is it just that your pride won't allow you to concede to certain things? Because I'm willing to, like, if I'm wrong about something, I'm willing to concede to that I was wrong. I'm not gonna be right about half of the things I say. Maybe even a quarter of the things that I say, because new information is always evolving. And so I'm willing to have a conversation and willing to admit and being wrong. I think that some people around here, they don't ever want to be wrong. They can never admit to being wrong. And that's why the conversation can never open up to an honest conversation. So that's just my thoughts, you guys. But who am I? Like I said, you can either value my opinion or not. It's not of no consequence to me one way or the other. It's still my opinion. I know where I formulated my opinion from, and I know it's not from a space of being disingenuous or being intellectually dishonest. This is a format that I came from a framework of being a member of the true crime community and me watching cases to find justice, to find, did the prosecutors prove their case? Did the defense put in reasonable doubt? I'm always looking at that. In these cases with R. Kelly, I'm sorry that I fall along the lines where I don't think that there's reasonable doubt. I believe that all of the witnesses were 100% truthful? No. Do I find but do I believe that R. Kelly is 100% truthful? No. And I know everybody likes to use that he didn't testify, so he didn't say anything. There was a lot said. You don't have to speak to say things. There was a lot that was done during pretrial that spoke for him. There were things that his attorneys did that spoke for him. And people want to omit that because it's not him actually verbalizing his or pieces or a part here or there of the story. But I don't believe that any side told 100% of the truth. So when we are discussing jurors and being the trier of fact and trying to the goal is to sift through all of that to see what do we believe really happened. And I am sorry, but with the videos, I believe that the child pornography happened. What was presented in the New York trial and how they structured the RICO, I think it was clever. Just like people think it's clever that Bo came up with this idea of this structural error. I just think he used the wrong person. But they think it was clever for him to come up with that strategy. I do too. I think it was clever for Shapiro and the Diddy appeal to come up with the strategy she came up with. Do I think that it's sufficient to work in those scenarios? No. But I feel like in the case of the prosecution and in the case of the prosecution in Chicago and in New York, after looking at the evidence and me pulling out the parts where I felt like some of them were lying and me pulling out where I thought they were truthful statements about, and then me looking at, I feel like he was guilty. He's guilty of it. And we might not like how you arrive at that, but I think that it's reasonable to say that reasonable people can find the guilty in what he was charged with. Now, like I said, can you make an argument that you don't agree with the RICO altogether? Yeah, people can make that argument. They can try to rely on history and the things that they think. I think that then that also becomes a problem, because I think if you examine historically, you will see like that the first cases of laws, how we end up getting into a federal RICO law is that there were states, and we know that the states are the laboratories of democracy, and there were states that were already testing this RICO style law within their states, and some of those were built on sex crimes. So I think we find some challenges in even trying to dispel that. But based on people's frame of reference and them looking at the federal RICO law, I can see them thinking that, okay, well, this is what we typically see. However, when you look at RICO, that is what we interpret. Do I think that the intenders of the law, like if you are a federalist, right, and you want to go back to like a law of first mention and what the law was intended, do we think maybe that the intenders didn't mean it to go this broad? No, but the way it was written was broad to say any type of criminal organization this law can apply to. And so the original designers left it broad that way. And the reason it was left broad was because those people who were charged with those crimes, it was difficult to prosecute them when you are trying to charge them with a single crime. And so that was part of the purpose. And so when I look at the R. Kelly case with the multiple crimes that he's alleged of being accused of, that does fit into that scope. That they felt like it because of the organization that he had created, that it was difficult for them to get him on these individual crimes. And so then they went this route. You said, "Hello, Carla. This is the only point I made. I don't think that man should have been used. Have a great yeah. Hey, Pat. Yeah, I think that it's possible. To me, I could see if that strategy would have been bomb if it would have got been on the BOP officer, and then maybe. But trying to insert Mondi into that, I don't. I don't I think it's some problems with that. But we'll see. We just spectators. That's it. I like I said, at the end, this is of no consequence to me. So that's why I don't leave this space looking at anybody like my op or looking at anybody and I'm mad or it's making me say I don't like them or anything like that because I'll come to this space as a spectator and to discuss and exchange and have interaction. That's it. I'm not looking for none of that other things. So with that being said, you guys, let me try to see if I can get a nap in. Because I gotta take some more medication at 3 o'clock. So let me try to see if I could get a little nap in and then I know I gotta wake up, get me some food. I'm gonna have to take some more medication and then get a nap in so that I can try to be available to have the discussion over at Levi with them later. I'm gonna get these things over to you now, Larry, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thank y'all for coming in here. Pat, Larry, Levi, thank you for coming in. I think Michelle came into my last live and Just B. I know y'all probably will catch the rest of this on the replay. So thank you for coming in. You said, Carla, I am recommending that you write down all your points because you're making very interesting, strong points. I can only suggest that all of us make a personal note so we miss nothing. Okay, I will. I will, Levi. I think the way I was able to encapsulate the points is because I had that guide. That's why I went and asked Google those questions so I could try to keep myself on track. But yeah, I will make sure. I normally do write something down, but Levi, right now, I am so loopy from this medicine. I just went the Google route and pulled it. So I didn't write it down, but I'll try to do it. And thanks for inviting me. Thanks for coming in and participating in the conversation. And I look forward to seeing you guys later.